Are you quick to lose your temper and let people have it?
Or do you remain quiet because you can't find the words to express what you want to say? Today, we're going to be discussing reacting versus responding. Are your emotions running the show?
Welcome to the Influencer's Journey Show. My name is Suzanne Hart.
And I'm Taria Hodge.
And the big question is this: how does the average entrepreneur like us, who started with limited time, zero marketing budget, or little to no online presence, get their authentic message into the marketplace and become a person of influence?
And what skills must you learn? And most importantly, who are you required to become to magnetically attract your divine client and build a loyal following? Great day, Suzanne. Welcome to another episode of the Influencers Journey Show. I'm going to tell you, I've been thinking about this topic, and I think it's going to be a really excited discussion. So I am super excited to sit down and unpack reacting versus responding with you today.
Well, good day to you as well. And this is an interesting topic. I think it's one that we often don't think about, but it impacts and runs our life day in, day out. So this was a game changer for me when I actually began to understand and unpack this for myself because it shifted me um,
Mhm.
and totally changed how I showed up in the world. So people say that Suzanne is grounded and calm and cool. If you ask my mother when I was younger, she'd be like, ground, what? Ground, what? I think that that shift is a result of this piece of work.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, it is, like I said, it is something to definitely pay attention to, because I would love to stand here and tell all of our super achievers that I'm so grounded, but no, not yet. Work in progress. So I am truly getting there. As we prep for the show, one of the scenarios that came to my mind was, I remember I was working at a home improvement company, and I really liked the job. I liked the job and I liked the people. And I especially liked the owner of the company, and I felt that, we had a lot of stuff in common, married, our kids were around the same age, and all around pretty cool, nice guy. And there were some things. I was working there for probably about 7 years. And over the course of 7 years, over the course of the time, I started to notice some changes happening in the organization,
Mm.
different people who were coming on board into the company. And I didn't quite like it so much. And then there was a particular incident that happened. And I remember going up to the owner of the company. Very nice, very cordial. I thought I was doing something. And I requested a conversation with him. And my words were, can you please step into your office,
Oh,
please? And I proceeded, and he got up, he came into his office. I could now thinking, just imagine what was going on in his mind. But I proceeded at the time to share with him all of my disappointments and my hurts and the things that I didn't like, and the changes that I would like to see happen, because I was in an environment that was not a conducive environment, in my opinion, for growth. Now, if anybody knows me at all, I could be quite what's the word? I could be quite, oh gosh, the word is slipping me. Opinionated, that's the word.
ah.
Quite opinionated. And there's a lot of passion when I get very opinionated and grounded and stuff. There's a lot of passion that comes through my voice when I speak. But needless to say, that was the day that I got fired.
Oh, lots of passion,
Lots of passion,
lots of opinion.
lots of opinions, right? Weren't aware of boundaries at the time, as my mom would say, you didn't know your place. And so as we prep for this conversation, that came to my mind because as I look back at it, I was purely in a reactive state versus a responding state. And
Yeah,
look at how my reaction to the environment, the reaction to the incident that happened on that day cost me my employment.
yeah, I get it. I get it. And you know, this is when hindsight is like 2020.
Mhm.
Just like, really? What was I thinking? Um, I remember when I first started employment, and at that time I was coming into my racial and cultural awareness.
Mhm.
So really present to who I was, my place in the world, if you'd like to speak, very present to racism, oppression, all that stuff. And could you say passionate? I was
Mhm.
passionate and a little impatient and a lot judgmental. And if you said the wrong thing to me, I would literally run up one side of you and come down the other and keep it moving. And took great pride in my ability to stand my ground and stand up for myself. And I remember my supervisor, and many people have heard me talk about Miss Joy Lepage, amazing woman. And I had had an incident, and she looked at me and she said, Suzanne, just because you see something, don't mean you have to say something. Those words have stuck with me forever because she got a complaint about how I had run up one side someone and came down the other. And I just kept it moving. Like, what was wrong with that? They were wrong. They were this. They said this. And sometimes it didn't even have
Right.
to do with me. I was
Mhm.
just taking a stance. And she proceeded to tell me that, you know, that there's two ways to say something. And if I wanted to advance, and if I actually wanted, and this is the key thing, to be heard,
Mhm.
I would be required to learn to express myself differently. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And it didn't land for me until I was out one evening with a friend of mine, and a gentleman was approaching me and persistent.
Mm.
And at that point, I had some wisdom to be like, no, thank you, I'm fine, very polite. Well, my friend got impatient and she had some words with that man.
I could imagine.
Oh, yeah, she had words, head waving, finger waving, the
Got the neck
whole,
going, neck going.
oh, she was in it. And I was like, oh, oh. And the man moved away and sat across and stared at us for the rest of the night.
Mm.
And when we left, he waited outside and he proceeded to walk over. And this man was in upset for sure. And he did a sidekick and knocked the top off a garbage can. At that moment, I knew we were in trouble. Luckily, the bouncers were around and they intervened. And what it demonstrated to me was what my beautiful boss was
Mhm.
attempting to tell me that I could not see,
Yeah.
that there's always a way to say something. Now, it may be that he may have persisted, but definitely her tone and her way of being aggravated him. He
Right.
was offended, he was upset, he was upset at how she talked to him, and he was hot.
Yeah. I can
And
imagine.
and it was the first time that I got present to reaction,
Mhm.
that I could possibly say something. And I knew that there was reactions before, but I didn't actually have to experience the consequences of my reaction. Because remember, I would keep it moving, leave you standing there. What's wrong with you? And this was the time I got face to face with what we created
Yeah.
because of our reaction. Yeah.
Yep.
Shifted me on a dime. I went back to work. I was like, I get it. Oh, different situation. And then I began to learn. So we're going to unpack this because the difference between reacting and responding, I believe, is the difference between being people listening and hearing you. Because sometimes people will listen, but their defenses are so high that they don't actually hear your message. They just see you and your mouth moving, and they get caught up in the tone, the aggression, the energy of what's being said, and they don't get past it. Therefore, they don't actually hear the message
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the intended message, and it shuts communication down completely.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, so we're going to unpack that today.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great, great conversation. So if you're joining us and you're just jumping on, please let us know who you are, where on the planet you're joining us from, what you do while you're living, and who do you serve? Who are the people that are your clients that you're super excited to give quality service to? As you do that, also, light up the comment section. Let us know what brought you out today, what questions you have about the topic, what comments you have as we continue on and we have the discussion. Just participate in the conversation. If you're listening to the replay, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. First of all, hashtag replay. So we know that you came back and you're listening, or you might be re-listening. And also let us know who you are, what you do while you're living, who do you serve, and what brought you out, and what are you taking away from the conversation?
All right. And then also, while you're out there, do us a favor and make sure you tag another super achiever in the conversation. And so if you are coming across our social channels and this conversation rings a bell for you, just go ahead and share it out to another super achiever, because this is one thing we know. If you have questions about something, we guarantee that you know at least 5 other people who have the same question. And then also, we're going to ask you to, if you have not done it already, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. The reason why you want to subscribe is this is where you would join us every week, Thursday evening, 7 p.m., to be in similar conversations. So don't forget, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button so you could get notified every time we do our Influencers Journey show. And then last but not least, we do have a special gift for you. So if you look below in the description of the video, you will have the opportunity to grab the Mindset Mastery Playbook. Now, this playbook is a labor of love from Suzanne Hart. And in this playbook, she has the opportunity to unpack the Mindset Mastery principles. And like I always say, these are the things that keep me on track in life, and it keeps me on track in business as well. So once again, look below the description of the video and make sure you download your playbook. And without any further ado, Suzanne, let's get this party bus rolling.
All right. So, for those of you that are just joining us, welcome back to the Influencers Journey Show. My name is Suzanne Hart. I'm here with Taria Hodge, and our topic today is reacting versus responding. Are your emotions running the show?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. And so I'm gonna kick it off because I like your introduction and how you teed up the conversation in the top of the show. And I think it's the thing that a lot of people, I know I, for one, didn't really understand and know that there is a distinction between reacting and responding.
Mm,
Okay. And
yeah.
so and it's a very fine line, I believe, because we're in situations, things happen, things come up all the time. And of
Mhm.
course, when these things arise, we do have emotions attached to the event. But the question becomes, how do we handle our emotions in the face of events? So I think it will be a really great thing for us to start by defining reacting and then defining responding.
Oh my goodness. It's such a distinction and super, super powerful. So, whenever I'm in reaction mode, what I really believe is happening, and it happens for all of us, is our emotions are making decisions. That's the way I like to put it.
Mhm.
Imagine your emotions making decisions. And I remember the first time I kind of began to hear this, and I was told that most of us never actually just make a decision, that our emotions actually decide
Decide
for us.
for us, right?
And what an interesting concept, because what it means is whatever is going on, it's your fear, it's your doubt, it's your anxiety, it's your anger, it's your frustration, it's your sense of joy. How many have been in joy and happiness and excitement and did something and you're like, how did I get here? Those are the emotions that are deciding for us. And why? Because most of us don't distinguish between, we think our emotions are our thoughts.
Yeah.
That we think that our emotions are, and it's not like they're not real, but we haven't distinguished ourself from our emotional state. And so what happens is something's going on, our emotions are high, and our emotions are choosing. And for me, that's often when my little girl, who's in me, who's having a temper tantrum or having an anxiety, who's filled with anxiety, she's running my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's reaction. And I like to say that reaction is when something pops out of your mouth and it hasn't actually registered here,
Right.
right? And have you ever said, "Oh, I wish I could take that back"?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can't. Maybe you can clean it up, but it can't go unheard. You can't take it back. That
Right.
is reaction.
Yeah.
Responding, however, is a whole different deal because it does take a level of mastery. And when you're responding, it's not that you don't experience the emotion. And if you're Suzanne, it's not like you're not having a full-blown conversation in your head.
Mm.
However, it's that ability to stop, breathe, pause,
Yeah.
and actually ask yourself, what is the best way to respond? And it is going from your emotional state to actually using thought.
Yeah.
And it's not denying emotions. It is not allowing the emotions to make the decision.
Yeah, it's I look at it, it's that practice of when you are in situations, of course, we can't deny the emotions, the emotion shows up, but it's being able to discern, what's the emotion from what's the actual situation. And it is a practice because sometimes,
Mhm.
even as I practice this, striving for mastery, as I, I practice this, one of the things that I, constantly have to remember to ask myself, what is the truth here? Okay. And so sometimes, things will happen, people will say stuff, and it triggers an emotion inside of you, but really, are you running on the emotion, or what's the facts of the matter? What's the tangibles in the thing? And if you understand, or you're able to pick out the tangibles of the stuff, then you're able to say, well, oh, okay, so now this is what I know to be true. How do I go ahead and deal with this? And I you know, find it very interesting because sometimes we have the ability to take time to do this. Sometimes the opportunity affords us to be able to
Mhm.
go away, get grounded, get settled, come back, think it through, and then respond. And then in other instances, response is required within seconds, minutes. So being
Absolutely.
able to kind of get to that place, pretty quickly.
It's interesting. It brings me back to a situation that I observed. I was there, and it was one of my retreats, and we were at a ropes course.
Oh,
And
this is not the one that I was stuck in the tree. I thought you was getting
no,
ready to
not
talk
that
about
one.
me again.
It's another situation where I just thought I'd just have some fun with my clients, right? So we were at a ropes course, and I remember the facilitator giving instructions of what we were going to do. And of course, it was we're going to climb a telephone pole and stand on top and jump off. We're
Mhm,
going to do some tightrope walking. We're going to do all these things. And it was interesting to watch people's some people's anxieties begin to go up. And there was one person that her anxiety became so high that you could see she was visibly in upset, and visibly fear was taking over.
mhm,
And I remember the facilitator looking at her and saying, "I'm just giving instructions. Nothing has happened. Come to the present. Don't run into the future."
mhm,
And it was such an interesting thing because I went over and I started talking to her and I asked her to breathe, be present, and listen to the instructions because her emotions were taking over and she had stopped listening.
mhm,
And
mhm.
she was painting full-blown pictures of what was going to happen, the doom and gloom, all the stuff that was going to occur, and it would have totally taken her out of the game. Isn't that what happens for
Oh
us?
yeah, I
Fear
was just
takes
about to.
over, anger takes over, and we see what we see because we're living from this place and nothing has happened yet.
Yeah, she was probably like me, stuck in the tree. I just like, oh, the sun is going to set, and then the vultures are going to come, and then we're all going to be eaten alive.
We're gonna die. And what was the most interesting thing is once we got her centered, and this is where the lesson is, once we got her centered, grounded, and in the present, and we reminded her to breathe, she had the most
Fun.
fun of anyone. She was jumping off telephone poles and doing all this thing. And she was like, "This is so much fun." And all I kept thinking was how she could have taken herself out of the game, because that's what we do. I'm not doing that. I don't do that. I can't do that
Yeah,
because her emotions were deciding and having her miss out on an opportunity. So think of how many times in business we do that.
yeah.
Think of how many times in life we do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's really interesting because the thing that's popping up for me is what makes it easy sometimes for us to respond because and versus react or react versus respond because yeah, there are situations that happen, sometimes where you're like, I'm not going to react to that that doesn't have a trigger for me and you're able to move through it. And then other times it's like before you know it, words are coming out of your mouth. I'm not going to tell anybody that I lay hands on people. I don't. But some people do
Mhm.
lay hands and all of that stuff. So why is it that certain situations cause us to be so emotional and drive that type of action from us, and others were able to thoughtfully respond to them.
Oh, great, great, great thought and great question. And in order to really create the context for this answer, is to talk about how we often say, like I could say, Taria pissed me off.
Mhm.
Right? Taria did this thing and she pissed me off. Bob made me so angry. Such and such frustrated me. And what's really interesting is we're actually kind of believing that they made me behave a certain way. And that is the furthest thing from the truth.
Mm.
And I know for some people, they're like, "Oh, no, that's not. They piss me off. I'm mad." Well, the choice of being mad is mine. The choice of being frustrated is
Right.
mine. The choice of being whatever my emotion is mine. The question is, why does it feel like someone's making it happen to
Yeah.
you? Well, I have an analogy of a plane landing, and I use it in all in my programs. And I always talk, there's a runway and the plane's coming into land. So I want you to think of um, things that are incomplete for you. So what I mean by that is areas in your life where you carry shame, and we all do,
Mhm.
right? It's that thing that you don't want anybody to know, and if they did find out, you would be just mortified.
Mm.
Think of areas in your life where you carry guilt. You feel bad that you didn't do something, you should have done something, you said you were going to do something, or you treated someone a certain way. Think of areas in your life where you've been judged.
Mhm.
Think of areas in your life where you're anxious or afraid. Think of areas in your life where you feel less than. Think of areas in your life where you feel not, you compare yourself to someone else. Think of areas in your life where racism has had you internalize some things. Gender discrimination has had you internalize some things of who you are. All those things, we walk around with these private wounds. So when someone says something that kind of picks at that scab,
I call it the sore spots.
that sore spot,
Hmm.
what ends up happening, and this is how I make it, it's like the runway opens up and their plane is coming in for a landing inside of you. Why? Because you have a runway. When we work on that and we heal it, that runway has doesn't open up. And they what they said had no place to land. So this is the thing. There are times when people say something and you're like, child, really? And you keep it moving because there's nowhere for it to land in you.
Yeah.
And then there's other times someone might say something and your head spins and you're just like, because they've landed in you in a place where you are not healed, you are vulnerable, they've touched something about you that you actually believe about yourself,
Mhm.
even if you're in denial of that belief.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so interesting because I liken that to always being able to go back and do the work, right? So we talk about doing the work all the time, and that's what it is. And so, I found instances when I look at my life now, there are things that people could have said to me
Mhm.
maybe 5, 10 years ago that would have got me in such upset, had me derailed and had me funky. And now people come and say the same thing. And I'm just like, whatever, because I've grown, you know,
Mhm.
past that spot is healed or that sore is healed, right? And so I love how you actually took the time to list all of the area, like your guilt, your shame, all those feelings of, probably unworthiness, whatever it
Yeah.
is, for you, like to pay attention to when these things pop up or those emotions pop up and ask yourself, what's the work that I have to do around this? So when other situations or scenarios arise, then I'll have the ability to not react in such a way, or
Yeah.
people don't, they call it pushing your buttons. Like people aren't pushing my buttons anymore because you don't have any buttons there to,
Or you have different buttons now.
right, right.
And I really want to say that because when we're talking about the difference between reacting and responding, it's a practice. Mindset and mastery is a practice. It is not a fait accompli.
Mhm,
So there will be things that don't bother you now. However, there's probably areas as you grow that you feel vulnerable.
mhm,
There's
mhm,
probably areas that as you grow that you still have doubt. And those now will be the areas where you might react. I mean, think about working really hard and falling short and just being disappointed in yourself, disappointed in how something turned out. And along comes someone who says something that just triggers your disappointment and you're feeling less than.
Mhm.
And you may have grown in that area, but this area is so fresh and so raw that you haven't been able to process your
Yeah.
disappointment. And so it's a constant practice
Oh,
of
yeah.
awareness.
Right. Yeah. And so, like I said, that's the whole thing is when you take a look at it, sometimes you'll have the ability to have the time to go back and work through it before you respond. And then other times you're right in it. And the processing needs to happen sometimes within a matter of minutes or even a matter
Yeah.
of seconds, you know? And so it's one of the things that like I said, it's practice, it's mastery, right? I don't always get it right, but one of the things that I'm correcting in my verbiage is I used to always say my pop-off gene is strong, right? So getting better. Right?
you, my mother would always say, we have carob in our blood. That's why we're like this. Like my mother can get hot. And she takes a carob in me. Watch out. And now I'm like, seriously?
Yeah. So that's what I used to say, the pop-off gene is strong. And so until I really, got, present to it, like, oh, do you want to be known for the person that always pops off at everything? Or,
Hmm.
pay attention to what your triggers are, working through those areas that you need to work through. And so the things that really merit your attention, you give them your attention and then you give them your attention in the best way. And so, in doing this work with you, and as our super achievers could already tell, this falls right in the category of our mindset work, right? Or I should say, let me not take any credit for it because I'm a student. Your mindset work, because trust me, they don't want to come to me. They don't want to come to me for mindset. That's a whole totally different thing.
We'll go activate your pop-off gene.
There's a class for that. Right. And so in working, with you and really understanding these things for myself, I know that there is a process because you heard me mention it, you've mentioned it. So what really needs to happen in order for us to be able to powerfully respond?
I think one is beginning by understanding the value in it.
Mm,
Because I remember when Joy, my supervisor at the time, was talking to me about how like responding, and she wasn't using that language, but she was like, you just can't do that. I didn't necessarily see the value in it because in the moment,
mm,
I thought I was being powerful and setting limits by being quite abrupt, offensive, and at times rude.
mm.
And so yeah, people were like, don't be messing with her because she gonna run up one side of you, come down the other, and she'll leave footprints, right? And so in my mind, I I thought I was good. However, I didn't see the character damage, if
Mm,
I could say that. In other words, because I was doing this in a professional setting, and it's the same thing in a personal setting, but we'll use a professional setting, for example, as I wanted to advance, what people would say and saw was an individual who could not manage stress, who could not manage conflict, who could not manage um, how she communicated with people when things got tense. That's what I was marketing and promoting. So advancement would not be readily available. And how often do you work? And I know people come to me for this all the time, is I have the skills, I have the experience, but I'm not getting the promotions.
Mm,
And oftentimes we're going to have to look at the character of this person. And I'm not talking characters whether you're a nice person or well-intended. I'm talking, who do you show up as when you're stressed?
mm,
Who do you show up as when there's conflict? Who do you show up as when you're frustrated? Who do you show up as when there's a time crunch? Because leadership is about being able to consistently show up no matter what's going on and move people towards a goal and do it in such a way that people feel inspired and they want to come back and they think that the journey, although difficult, was exciting.
yeah.
Can you do that? That's really what we're talking about. And so it was for me, it was when I understood the cost
Mm,
of just popping off, using Sharia's words, and activating my pop off gene. That's when I wanted to learn how to respond. So I think the first thing is really understanding. Does that make
right.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Right? Understanding, the value in it. I think the second thing, and I say it all the time, is no matter what's going on, is to take that moment before you respond to pause,
Hmm.
breathe, and sometimes journal in your own mind. And I come from a crisis background, and one of the things I used to say to my team all the time is, we don't have to have a solution right away. You don't have to have an answer, because sometimes things are just so feeling out of control
Yeah.
that you can't come up with an answer. You're just so emotionally activated. And so there's times when you can to just pause and say, you know what? I just need a moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
Give me some time. I need to go process this and kind of figure out what's going on for me so I can come back and respond to you. Because sometimes you and I are required to know when we're on overload.
Yeah.
Like, my emotions are so high that you're not going to get anything coherent. And if it's Suzanne, I'm going to start to cry. And when I start to cry, that means I'm at my max, and then not nice things happen.
Yeah.
I'm required to know that. So I think there's that. There's, just knowing where you are emotionally, and do you have the bandwidth and the capacity to keep moving. I think after that, it is, and you've paused, it is kind of now going, what's going on for me? And I think this is so key, because oftentimes we go, what's going on with them? Right?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's always easier to look at the other person,
Like,
right?
what is
Or to
going
do
on with
to do
them?
the introspective work.
Right? And so yeah, there's something going on for them in whatever way they're communicating with you. But the real question is, what's going on for me right now that I'm emotionally charged?
Hmm.
And those are the times where I don't know what's going on. I'm just emotionally charged. So you got to take a break and figure it out. Other times it's, I'm angry,
Hmm.
it's, I'm hurt, I am disappointed, I am frustrated. And for me, just being able to name the emotion for myself helps me get a handle on it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I may not be able to deal with the emotion in the moment. And this work is not about suppressing the emotion and responding. It's about naming the emotion and then taking time to deal with it. Now, you may not be able to deal with it in the moment, but just being able to name it is helpful.
Yeah.
And then kind of asking yourself, do I want to respond from this place?
Right.
The answer is often no. This is not going to be helpful. And then it is, how do I want to respond? And this is the thing, to achieve what I truly desire,
Mm,
the end goal.
yeah.
And oftentimes, when we are in reaction mode, we're not thinking about our
About the
end
end goal,
goal,
right?
We're thinking about
in the moment.
retaliation in the moment. We're thinking about defending ourselves in the moment. We're thinking about stopping a we're not thinking about what do I really want here?
Yeah.
And you know, we were having this conversation yesterday, and
Mhm.
you were saying it's when you stay focused on what you truly desire that you're able to pull back and say, what am I going to do here?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the scenarios that comes to mind was I remember when my daughter was here, she's going through her doctor's appointment. And, you know, it's unbelievable that we got to the doctor's the doctor's office and they're like, we don't have an appointment. Your appointment has been canceled. And we're like, canceled. Nobody called us, nobody said anything. Surgery's within the next couple of days, and this procedure, MRI, is absolutely necessary, before the surgery. And I'm sitting there and I'm working or talking to I'm not quite sure what her position is, so I'm just gonna say the nurse behind the desk. And I'm looking at the just how flippant, how casual, like it's not a big
Mhm.
deal, almost condescending, because I have to admit that I did feel that coming off. And I'm gonna tell you, my initial emotion was like, "Lady, you about to get snatched. You just don't know."
That's real. That's
You're
real.
about to get dragged over this desk. But in that moment, it's like I remembered our work, and I was just like, oh, there's a process, for this. So how quickly can I run through the process? And I know she
Mhm.
probably thought that I was crazy because she said what she said and she expected me to leave. And I just stood there. And I came to the conclusion at the end of the day, the thing that's needed is the MRI. And so I made a decision that we're going to get the appointment to get the MRI. So, what needs to happen in order
Mhm.
to get that done? Now, this is our show, right? I could say it.
Oh
I could
yeah.
be PC about it, or I could be sweet about it. And I chose to be sweet about it. And I know in going through that process, like you're female, you know how to get what you want, right?
Mhm.
We know how we show up when we want what we want, and we're going to get
Mhm.
what we want. And some people call it charm, some people call it charisma, some people call it blowing smoke, whatever you choose to call it. But that's my goal, and I'm gonna get what I want. And literally in that exchange, all of 45 minutes, right? I just watched the whole attitude shift.
Mhm.
She went from being dismissive to being helpful to making phone calls to, even by time we leave, apologetic and taking ownership of
Mhm.
the mistakes on their end. Now, I'm going to say this, a lot of things like we talked about earlier about having a place for the plane to land.
Mhm.
And so at that moment, I knew the place that the plane was going to land is that if I did not help my daughter through this, I equated it for me failing as a parent. And I know for some
Mhm.
people hearing that, they're like, how did you get there? But that's what our emotions do.
Yeah.
For us. And so as I'm standing there and I have my daughter, her fiance, my fiance, we're all there as a family. The only thing that's going through in my mind at the time is that I can't fail at this. So, whereas she, was probably thinking, child, it's an MRI. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
no, my whole worth of the parent is riding on this appointment. So we're gonna get it done, So it's just, those things, being able to, like you said, sometimes you don't have the luxury of stepping back and
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it and taking the time, you have to be able to do it on the spot. So the thing that helps me is to always ask the question, what is it that I desire? At the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, what is it that I want? And after I've decided what I want, then what needs to happen, to get it. And then
And you,
you focus from that
you
standpoint.
and one of the things you're really alluding to is our ability to have humility, right?
Hmm.
Because sometimes popping off is all prideful, popping off is all ego, popping off is all bravado, if you will.
Hmm.
And in my work, there's this whole thing called recovery.
Hmm.
And recovery means I'm going to be humble enough
Hmm.
to create an environment or a space for the person who just pissed me off
Right.
to recover.
Hmm.
And I'm going to actively do the work to create that environment. And that's really what you're talking about. I'm going to treat you with respect. I'm going to treat you different than you taught me. I'm going to engage you and I'm going to create the environment and I'm going to be humble
Yeah.
and allow the space for you to recover. And my goal is truly to create the outcome I
Hmm.
desire.
Yeah.
And so I think when we're talking about this body of work and we're talking emotional mastery takes a level of maturity and
Yeah.
it takes a level of wisdom and it takes a level as you said, you were able to to know what the trigger was for you and
Mhm.
why you would get so upset because you were equating it to failing as a parent. And this is so key. And I really want to stay here for a moment because when we're engaged with someone, we don't know the
Right.
vulnerability,
Yes.
right? We don't know the story they're telling themselves or circumstance they find themselves in. All we see is the event.
Yeah.
And for times, that event can be charged with emotions and consequences and big things for that person, but we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing the event. So while we're being flippant,
Mhm.
they're carrying
Right.
you're carrying a charge.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about. And so with this, I mean, there's two sides to this if you really get this work. There's a side that says, I've got to manage my emotional state. And then there's another side that says, as someone who works with the public, as someone who is um, aware of other people, is going to have a listening
Hmm.
for someone else's emotional state.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best to be present to what's not being said,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That's emotional mastery, where I'm going to really listen, not just to the words, but to the tone and to the energy, so that I can be present to what may not be said. And we all know it when someone comes up and we're like, ooh, something's up.
Yeah.
And they're not going to say it, but you can feel it all over down. Those are the moments where we want to be extra sensitive and we want to exercise emotional mastery to create the space for them to be in all their emotional state. And how can I help you navigate achieving the goal you want so you don't pop off at me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such amazing work.
Hmm. It is. And I know one of the questions that we always answer in our time together when we do the show is, what does this all have to do with influence? And one of the things that just came up for me is that I see this all the time on social media, like the emotional tirades that people have. And a lot of times, you could tell that they're in reaction mode. So
Yeah.
an event happened. And then the first thing that they do is they go onto social media, and I call it the rant, and they have the rant. And yes, the rant feels good because number one, you've been able to get it off of your chest. You're gonna have some people who are going to say yeah, and they're gonna fuel that fire and pour gasoline on it, with the comments. And a lot of times when I sit back and I really look at how a conversation is unfolding and how people
Yeah.
are enrolling in a conversation, the question that stands out for me is this the intended purpose? Is this the outcome that you would have truly desired if you sat and you just gave it a moment to think about it? And so
Yeah.
it's like one of the things that I say, yes, the event happened, but wouldn't it be better if you could actually shape that experience
Yeah.
into a teachable experience, a learnable? What do you want people to really walk away from with this experience versus just getting everybody all riled up? And at the end of the day, now it's not just you that are in a funky place, but you've got probably hundreds of people funky along with you. Is that
Mhm.
what you really intended to happen? And so that's the power of the conversation that we're having. I know we talked about it, from the personal level, but think about it how it expands when we
Yeah.
enroll other people in our conversations.
I think what comes up for me as you're talking is the difference of being the victim of my circumstance
Mhm,
and being empowered or being the hero in my own world. And I think that there are people who are consistently sitting in the victim seat
mhm,
where they are pointing outwards and saying, look at what this person did to me. Look at what that
mhm,
person did to me. Look about what this person, and what they're actually doing is they're fueling and attracting other victim-minded people.
mhm,
And I think as leaders who want to be empowered, I think it's taking an approach of ownership and responsibility and really beginning to ask yourself, how can I turn this
right,
situation around for my greater good and the greater good of other people? And also, how do I model
yeah,
what's possible for those who are watching me, because I know for myself, I am so inspired by people who make make lemonade out of just
yep.
bad situations. I'm just inspired and awed by them. And I
Mhm.
think great leaders are those who can turn things around that seem almost impossible. And so I really think that that's really what we're looking at. So as we go along this vein, the question I have for you is, what is the most challenging thing for you when you look at, I need to respond, but man, do I want to react?
Like I said, for me, the challenging thing is always remembering that it's a practice, there's
Mm,
steps. And so it's one thing to be able to be a part of a conversation like this and you hear it and you was like, wow, that's such great insight. Never heard this before. I'm going to start running through these things. And, you know, it sounds great, but when you're in the situation, like, do you really remember to do the practice? Do you really remember to think about what is the end result
mhm,
that you want? What is the thing that you desire? Do you remember to always take into consideration? You call it leave people whole. I call it giving people the opportunity to save face, right?
mhm,
And that was one of the things that I had to learn how to do too. Like sometimes you can get so caught up in your own emotions that you could just be focused on demolishing, someone and making that person feel bad. Or you could just simply open up the door and give the person a chance to exit
yeah,
with face. Okay. And 9 times out of 10, when you do that, you consider the value in the relationships. So those are things that I always take a look at too, is what are the values? one of the things that I hold dear to me is relationships. And so the way how I react or I choose to respond, what's the impact that that's going to have on this relationship? So nine
Yeah.
out of 10, if I react with the first thing that comes to my mind and I say, what I want to say, how I feel, and we said it, like sometimes these feelings do come up. You do have feelings of anger. Sometimes you're mad, sometimes you're really pissed off. Okay, but do I react that way and damage a relationship? Or do I take the time to go off, sit and say, you know what? This relationship has value to me. Okay. And so now that there are things that are on the table, how do we come back and address these things in such a way that both parties feel heard, but most importantly, they feel respected?
And I think, even if this is a relationship that you are going to put an end to, because there's relationships that we know
Mhm.
we got to sunset, we got to put closure on.
I say, I always say, man, time to light the torch,
Yeah,
burn that
Teresa,
bridge.
like, we gonna burn that bridge and I think for me, I don't need to burn a bridge. I don't want to burn a bridge.
Mhm.
However, I might want to close the gate or put the more up so that
That's such a nice way. Thank you for the reframe because it can
right?
be like, man, bridges, torch, you can't cross back over.
No, I don't want to burn the bridge. However, I want to put closure on a relationship in the most respectful way possible because nothing is permanent.
Right.
And I might say, I don't want this person in my life, but then a circumstance or a situation may show up and there they are. And they're there all salty because you torched the bridge and you just lit them on fire on the way out. And they're just like, oh yeah, I remember you. That's called many divorces, by the way. Uh, and can you have closure that's grounded in respect, grounded in a sense of humanity, and leaving people whole and complete? Can we end that way? And I think this is some of the stuff that we're beginning to talk about for sure.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So you want to close us out with the thought of the week, my dear?
Absolutely. Um, you know, this thought comes from the joyful prophet movement, and I have never heard of them before, but this really resonated in terms of this topic, right? Responding is based in facts, the present, and curiosity. Think about that.
Mhm.
Reacting is based in the past and defensiveness. So true. Which one you use will alter your reaction to others completely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like drop the mic.
Yes, I think that that definitely puts the icing on the delicious cake that we have baked today. That's my cake analogy.
So the challenge I'm going to put out to everyone that's listening is to really do your best to implement something that you've taken from this conversation. How are you going to begin to embrace emotional mastery? Even if it's thinking about the cost of your reactions in your past and maybe what you want to do different to get the outcome that you want. So until we meet again, please know you're brilliant. That's why you're doing this work. Please know you're also very special, and we do this work because the world is waiting. The world is waiting for your unique gift. Blessing, we will be back here next week, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until we meet, stay blessed, and we will see you soon.
All right, take care.